What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. It is Saturday, May 31st, 2025, and I have some breaking news to share with you guys. Right now, it is 15:08 Eastern Time here in the United States, and we have some major breaking news coming in from the Middle East and from Eastern Europe. But before I get into all of that, I just wanted to share out this GoFundMe for someone who lives in Kentucky. They were impacted by the tornadoes. Their entire home was destroyed, as you can see in these pictures. So I'm going to leave a link to the GoFundMe in the comments and in the description down below. They have a goal of raising $2,800 and they've already raised $700, so they just need a little bit more so they can fix up their home. So we have some major breaking news coming in from the Middle East. Reports are coming in indicating that Israel will attack Iran's nuclear program within the next 72 hours during the Jewish holy days of Shavuot. Okay, so in the next 72 hours, Israel may attack Iran's nuclear program, and this could be the reason why we had all of those Skymaster messages on Wednesday. Skymaster messages are the highest priority nuclear codes transmitted by U.S. nuclear forces. The only higher priority message over a Skymaster is the emergency war order, which is the actual order to launch the nukes, okay? So Skymaster messages could be thought of as high priority targeting information and arming codes for the nuclear forces, and that was on Wednesday. There were 57 of them, okay, just in about a 16-hour period, which I've never personally heard that many in such a short period of time. That rivals Culinary Night. So get prepared, guys. It looks like Israel's getting ready to strike Iran. And the Israeli media outlet Mariv is reporting that several Israeli government ministries are holding secret meetings to prepare for a possible attack on Iran, as well as to prepare for Iranian retaliation. The report came after Trump ordered the end of joint U.S.-Israeli coordination on a possible attack on Iranian nuclear facilities. So, in case you guys are not aware, Trump has ordered the end of Israeli-U.S. coordination on a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. So now Israel is basically on their own, and the Israeli government is preparing for an attack on Iran. They're holding secret meetings. And Iran has issued several notice to airmen for June 1st, 2nd, and 4th due to rocket launches. Okay, so this could be related to a possible strike. Okay, and this is for the Tehran Flight Information Region. A notice to airmen, or NOTAM, is just basically an airspace closure or restriction. Okay, so very, very concerning. And Iran has strongly rejected the latest report by the IAEA, which accused Tehran of running an undeclared nuclear program using unreported material. Iran said that they were politicizing the situation and that the IAEA was politically motivated and not neutral, okay, which we know is not true. And Israeli officials said Israel will not allow Iran to possess nuclear weapons. Top Israeli security officials believe a military strike on Iran's nuclear sites is both possible and necessary to prevent Tehran from acquiring nuclear weapons, Ynet reported on Thursday, citing unnamed Israeli officials. Israel will not allow Iran to possess nuclear weapons, the report quoted the officials as saying, adding that Israel was preparing for every scenario, guys. So Israeli security officials saying Israel will not allow Iran to possess nuclear weapons. So regardless of what Trump wants, Israel is going to act on their own. The officials said no nuclear agreement between the U.S. and Iran can be considered good unless Tehran dismantles its nuclear program, which they described as central to Iran's strategic doctrine. So Israel will not accept any deal between the U.S. and Iran unless it involves full dismantlement, okay, which Iran has made clear they're not going to dismantle their nuclear program. And here's more proof of that. Here's a tweet from the Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi. He said, "Media is speculating about an imminent Iran-U.S. deal. Not sure if we are there yet. Iran is sincere about a diplomatic solution that will serve the interests of all sides, but getting there requires an agreement that will fully terminate all sanctions and uphold Iran's nuclear rights, including enrichment. Path to a deal goes through the negotiating table and not the media. As for the latest fake news against Iran, U.S. diplomacy using Iran to attack American critics is low, even for Israel." So he's claiming that there is no imminent Iran-U.S. deal, and he's confirming that Iran wants all sanctions lifted and that they're going to be able to continue to enrich uranium, which Israel has said is their red line. And Poland is massively fortifying their border with Russia and Belarus. We have some new pictures coming out from the Polish-Russian-Belarus border. Here you can see the Polish army putting up hundreds and hundreds of anti-tank obstacles, okay? And they're also laying minefields and building these trenches that have these special nets to stop drones from flying into the trenches. These are just, like chicken wire mesh fencing here. So this is absolutely insane. And we have a severe geomagnetic storm watch for June the 2nd. There could be auroras as far south as Alabama and California, okay? So this is coming from the NOAA, G4 Severe Geomagnetic Storm Watch in effect for June the 2nd during the daytime hours, UTC time. Okay, so UTC is 4 to 5 hours ahead of US time typically. A coronal mass ejection is an eruption of solar material and magnetic fields. When they arrive at Earth, a geomagnetic storm can result. Watches at this level are very rare. A CME is anticipated to arrive at and impact Earth with the potential for elevated geomagnetic response, and depending upon the orientation of the embedded magnetic field, potential exists for strong storm levels. Detrimental impacts to some of our critical infrastructure technology are possible, but mitigation is possible. The general public should visit our website to keep properly informed. The aurora may become visible over much of the northern half of the country and maybe as far south as Alabama. Wow. So this is absolutely huge news. It looks like Monday is going to be the day. They're saying Monday UTC time during the day is when this thing could peak. So keep your eyes out Sunday night, Monday evening for a possible aurora. And here in PA and much of the country, there's going to be clear skies, so we should be able to see a nice strong aurora again. And we have some very concerning news coming from Asia. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warned allies yesterday that China is now practicing to take Taiwan by force. He said China is no longer just building up its military forces to take Taiwan, it's actively training for it every day. He also said any attempt by Communist China to conquer Taiwan by force will result in devastating consequences. Wow. He said the threat that China poses is real and it could be imminent. Wow, very strong words there from Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary. And Hegseth also mentioned Poland, the Baltic countries, Israel, and the Persian Gulf states as America's model allies. And China announced the beginning of a combat readiness exercise in the South China Sea. The PLA's Southern Theater Command announced a combat readiness exercise in the waters and airspace around the Scarborough Shoal, including a strengthening of naval and air forces. Simultaneously, the China Coast Guard has announced increased law enforcement patrols in the areas surrounding Scarborough, which China claims as its territorial waters. Wow. So China is doing a combat readiness exercise, and Hegseth is saying that China is getting ready to invade Taiwan, and they're actually training for it. And if you remember, China has already done several blockade exercises and live fire exercises around Taiwan in the last 6 months. They did, I think, 2 or 3 of them where they practiced a full blockade of Taiwan. And they also did that massive live fire exercise right off the coast of Australia without even telling the Australian government, and it forced passenger planes to divert. Very crazy situation when that happened. And Iran has warned that Trump's threats to destroy nuclear sites crossed a red line and will have severe consequences. And Politico, citing a U.S. official, is reporting that the administration has decided to halt spending and the use of advanced munitions against the Houthis. The administration aims to better allocate its resources by focusing on addressing the root causes of the Houthi attacks. Okay, so we're no longer going to be striking the Houthis anymore, it looks like. And during Trump's recent visit to the Middle East, leaders of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE opposed the strike on Iran's nuclear facilities and urged him to pursue a new nuclear deal. A senior U.S. official said the U.S. is preparing to give Iran a term sheet that would include an end to nuclear enrichment. If they don't accept these terms, it's not going to be a good day for the Iranians, the official said. Wow, so basically a list of demands is being drawn up, and it's going to be delivered to Iran. We'll have to see, because the Trump administration has made so many empty threats, so we'll see if this is true or not. And a Hamas official confirmed with BBC News that Hamas has rejected the U.S. ceasefire proposal. And the Israeli chief of staff said that another prisoner exchange deal with Hamas in Gaza will allow Israel to focus on Iran, which really is what Israel is most concerned about. And U.S. President Donald Trump nominated Lieutenant General Alex Grynkevich to command the U.S. and allied forces in Europe. Grynkevich is a U.S. Air Force Lieutenant General who served as the Director of Operations of the Joint Staff since 2024. He previously served as the Commander of the 9th Air Force from 2022 to 2024 and as the Director of Operations of U.S. Central Command from 2020 to 2022. During his career, Grynkevich was an F-16 and F-22 pilot and achieved the U.S. Air Force classification of command pilot by having more than 2,300 flight hours. So he's an accomplished fighter pilot, okay, and he's going to be commanding U.S. and allied forces in Europe. And Ukrainian monitoring resources have calculated that the Russian military has transferred 40 Tu-22 strategic bombers to the Olenia Air Base, which is up near Finland, and apparently about 20% of Russia's Tu-95s. Also, Russia transferred more Ilyushin 76 cargo planes to the Engels Air Base. Apparently, the 8th flight in the last 4 days landed yesterday. This is a level of activity that has not been seen since the beginning of the war. And Ukrainian experts and journalists suggest that the Russian Federation may be increasing its stock of missiles via the Ilyushin 76 cargo flights for strategic aviation, preparing for massive attacks on a scale not yet seen in the entirety of the ongoing conflict. Okay, so Russia could be preparing massive attacks that they have not even done yet. Okay, hundreds and hundreds of missiles and drones all at once. Absolutely insane. And the head of the State Duma Defense Committee in Russia, Kartopolov, told RIA Novosti that Russia will respond harshly and sensitively if Germany starts supplying Taurus missiles to Ukraine. Okay, we know Germany is going to be jointly producing Taurus missile factories in Ukraine, and they have removed all range restrictions. So these Taurus missiles could theoretically strike as far as Moscow, and they could hit that big bomber base Engels, where Russia launches a lot of their strikes out of. Okay, they could destroy the runways there with the Taurus missiles to prevent Russia from using it, at least in the short term, till they repair the runways. The Taurus missile has massive warheads. They can also take out the Crimean Bridge. And we had a Russian nuke sniffer plane fly into Belarus for some reason a few nights ago. I'll show you guys the flight path of that. And U.S. Marines fired HIMARS rockets on the Swedish island of Gotland in the Baltic Sea as part of a NATO exercise. It was the first time a HIMARS system was fired on the island. Okay, so this is very, very serious. U.S. Marines firing HIMARS on Gotland Island. That's clearly preparations for an attack from Russia. Okay, one of the biggest fears has always been that Russia would conquer the Gotland Island. And Poland has made an unprecedented HIMARS rocket deployment across Russia's northern border. The Polish army has deployed M142 HIMARS rocket artillery systems to Finland to participate in NATO's Swift Response 25 exercises as part of a broader contribution that includes personnel from both the 1st Rocket Brigade and the 6th Airborne Brigade. The exercises have been spread across the territories of Norway, Sweden, Finland, Latvia, and Lithuania, all of which are in close proximity to Russian forces. So basically, this is a secret deployment, hidden as, oh, we're just moving it there for exercises, but clearly Poland is moving an entire HIMARS brigade to Finland. And I was showing you guys in one of my recent updates, you might remember all those Polish cargo planes that flew up to southern Finland to Utti, spelled UTTI. There were like probably 8 or 10 Polish cargo planes that all went up there in one night. And now I know why they went up there. They were moving HIMARS up there. Okay, so maybe 1 or 2 dozen HIMARS systems have been deployed now in southern Finland, which would provide coverage over even Estonia. If Russia were to invade Estonia, they could strike Russian forces from southern Finland with those HIMARS. Okay, because the Gulf of Finland is not that big. It's not that far from southern Finland, okay, especially with the ATACMS missiles that Poland has. So this is huge news. And we have some interesting footage coming out showing a large movement of American forces and heavy equipment in Romania. I'll show you guys the video of that. Very, very strange. And a French defense specialist commented on the recent massive Russian nuclear arsenal data leak, saying, "We know everything from A to Z. I think this is the worst leak of classified documents in world military history." Wow. And a new U.S. Air Force commissioned RAND report says NATO and U.S. forces would have a clear edge over Russia in a conventional war thanks to air power. The analysis finds that NATO would quickly gain air superiority, allowing it to strike Russian forces, disrupt logistics, and tilt the battlefield. Despite concerns over drone technology and ammo production, the report says NATO's offensive potential far outweighs Russia's. So that's why Russia's not going to do a big invasion of NATO. See, the problem is that the think tanks and the bureaucrats in NATO and the U.S. don't understand that this isn't going to be like the 1980s where, we were concerned about 300,000 Russian forces crossing over from East Germany, okay, a massive invasion of Western Europe. They're not going to do that. What they're going to do is they're going to go for low-hanging fruit. Places like Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, those countries have like 50,000 troops and they have no air force. They have very limited rocket artillery, okay? That's what they're going to do. They're going to go for Lithuania and try to close the Suwałki Gap. All right, they're not going to go for Poland or Germany or the UK. They're not going to invade those countries, by land. If anything, they'll just use missiles and they'll strike decision-making centers and military sites with missiles in Poland, Germany, etc., whatever country they feel is a threat. But they're not going to do any kind of big invasion, okay? So their thinking is flawed. And Finland has officially designated Iran as one of its most dangerous intelligence threats for the first time, signaling growing concern over Iran's espionage activities in Europe. And U.S. Senators Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal arrived in Kyiv in Ukraine. Very interesting. And the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said, "Our old relationship of steadily deepening integration with the United States is over." Wow. And Trump said he doesn't feel sorry for Biden having cancer. And the Trump administration is expanding federal surveillance capabilities through increased reliance on Palantir and their data analysis technology, according to the New York Times, stating that the Trump administration will begin centralizing and collecting personal data on Americans using Palantir, a company owned by Peter Thiel. So very, very concerning. And a powerful series of earthquakes at the Campi Flegrei volcano in Italy has raised fresh concerns among scientists about the risk of a major eruption. Okay, so Campi Flegrei is a supervolcano right near Naples. Over the past 6 months, scientists have recorded more than 3,000 smaller earthquakes known as tremors, a figure far above normal seismic activity for the area. Geologists have also observed a sharp rise in gases being released from the volcano, another warning sign. Adding to the alarm, carbon dioxide emissions from Campi Flegrei have surged, with Italy's National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology reporting daily levels between 4,000 and 5,000 tons. Experts say increased gas emissions often mean magma is moving closer to the surface, putting more pressure on the volcano. According to Italy's National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology, magma is now just a few miles below the surface, a shallow depth that raises more concern. If pressure continues to build, it could trigger an eruption with little warning, especially with all the recent quakes and gas releases. Campi Flegrei poses a serious threat to over 4 million people living in the metropolitan area of Naples. If it erupts, the damage could be widespread. Buildings could be destroyed by lava flows, ash clouds, and fast-moving hot gases. Roads, power, and water supplies might be cut off, making life dangerous and chaotic. The city of Naples and nearby towns like Pozzuoli sit close to the Campi Flegrei, putting many lives and homes in the danger zone. Campi Flegrei's last eruption was 1538. While it doesn't erupt often, major eruptions happen every few thousand years. The volcano has shown signs of unrest in recent decades. Scientists say it's not possible to predict exactly when the next eruption will happen, but the recent activity means it could come sooner rather than later. Since 2005, the ground in the area has been slowly rising and falling in a process called bradyism. This happens when magma and gas build up underground, pushing the surface up or letting it sink back down. For example, in the nearby town of Pozzuoli, the ground has risen by 4.7 feet. Wow, so this is a supervolcano near Naples. Massive buildup of pressure underground, causing the ground to swell by 4.7 feet. and this is a super volcano, so this would affect the entire world, not just Italy, not just Naples. Okay, this is almost like a Yellowstone supervolcano situation. It would cause a volcanic winter. It would cause crops to fail worldwide due to poor weather conditions, okay, in the northern hemisphere summer. This is why you got to have emergency food storage. This is why you got to have a bug out bag. This is why you got to be prepared, okay? And what you're looking at here is some more NATO reconnaissance around the Suwalki Gap or Suwałki Gap in northeast Poland. And you can see one private recon plane flying around Kaliningrad and an AWACS plane circling Lithuania. They've really been focusing a lot on Lithuania with their surveillance and reconnaissance lately. And here we have some kind of Polish reconnaissance plane flying right up to the Belarus border here, doing very intensive reconnaissance right on the border of Belarus, okay? And look at this. This is crazy. Look at all these flights back and forth, or constant reconnaissance here just east of the city of Białystok in northeast Poland, right on the border of Belarus. This is really intense, guys. Something is brewing if they're flying this close to the Belarus border and making all these passes here. Absolutely insane. And then here you can see they were facing towards the Suwałki Gap, towards the north, okay, doing an east to west pattern here, looking north and south. And here we have the NOTAMs for Iran over the next few days. Here we have video footage coming out of Romania showing a large movement of American forces. You can see these utility trucks and then a large number of strikers, infantry fighting vehicles, okay? Look at all those strikers there on the move in Romania for some reason. This is very, very unusual, okay? And then here you can actually see the Russian nuke sniffer that flew into eastern Belarus, and it flew really low and then it left. And then at the same time we had more Russian VIPs leave Moscow. What's interesting is all of the Russian VIPs left Moscow just a few days before we heard all those Skymaster messages, okay? So something is definitely going on. And then also at the same time as the Russian nuke sniffer was in Belarus, we had more NATO reconnaissance in the Suwałki Gap and Lithuania. And then also we had a Russian Navy cargo plane go to Kaliningrad. So they're moving equipment into Kaliningrad. But that's the latest breaking news that I have. I might be back later on tonight with more breaking news. If not, I'll be back tomorrow. And until the next time, take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 Ps. Prepare, practice, and persevere. Culinary out. And before I continue with the breaking news, I wanted to mention the sponsor for this update, which is NYPrepper Supply. Guys, NYPrepper Supply has brought back their $200 discount on their 3-month emergency food supply. And to get the discount, you got to go to preparewithnyprepper.com, and the link is in the description below this video. That's preparewithnyprepper.com to get $200 off the NYPrepper Supply 3-month emergency food supply. This is freeze-dried food, so it has a 25-year shelf life, and it's all packed within 6 rugged, watertight buckets. So it doesn't take up a lot of space. You can easily fit this in a small closet in a studio apartment. And the food has all of your essential vitamins and minerals and up to 2,000 calories per day. So use the link preparewithnyprepper.com to get the NYPrepper Supply 3-month emergency food supply, 25-year shelf life for just $500. That's $200 off their normal price. So use the link in the description below this video.